Hello and welcome to season 2 of the Build Your A Team podcast. This season, we'll be sharpening our focus in our discussions on the show. For season 2, we'll be uploading these videos on YouTube as well, so everyone can see, in this case, Jim's beautiful face. The purpose of the podcast is to share how veteran entrepreneurs and business leaders build exceptional teams, uncovering whether their success comes from strategic analysis, intuition, or just pure luck. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking with Jim Russo. Do you want to say hi real quick?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Freddie. I've been told many times that I have a face for radio and a voice for print, so I appreciate that introduction. You can see with this size nose, it's often difficult to to have a beautiful face, as you say, but I'll do my best at least.
Well, that knows we'll be talking about it in a little bit. For those who don't know, Jim Russo is the founder and chief investment strategist of Altrius Capital Management, combining a distinguished military background with expertise in finance. A graduate of the Naval Academy, a two-time All-American boxer, hence the nose, Jim served as a fighter pilot in the U.S. Marine Corps, gaining a global perspective that informs his investment approach. In '97, Jim founded Altrius, bringing his contrarian investment philosophy to the forefront. His approach is categorized by value-based, income-focused discipline, and he's known for investing alongside his clients. Some notable success: Altrius Capital Management was recognized as the PSN Manager of the Decade and Top Gun for its disciplined alpha dividend strategy in all cap value. I don't know what that means, so I'm going to ask you about that. Ranked among the top 100 financial advisor firms in New Jersey and North Carolina by investor.com. And as of this month, they manage assets approximately 620 million. Jim is also an author. He wrote Invest Like an Aardvark, and where he shares his unique investment philosophy, challenging traditional market thinking. I guess though that's up to perspective because your philosophy is actually very traditional, from my understanding.
Yeah,
Anyway,
in some
yeah.
ways, the only correction I have for you is I was a C-130 pilot, not a fighter pilot. So I was like me. It's the Herc is big, slow, and ugly. So it's similar, but yeah, everything else was true.
Well, yeah, I just want to say one last thing about you. Despite all of this and despite me knowing you for years, Jim, you remain super modest. You believe humility is crucial for long-term success everywhere, especially the investment world. And I think your just perspective, it sets you apart from other Wall Street analysts and investment managers. So again, welcome. Love to love to have you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Freddie.
What is PSN Manager of the Decade in Top Gun?
On Wall Street, all asset managers are always you're always ranked, right? The great thing about our business, which is similar to the military, is that you always know where you stand. And that's something I actually envied about fighter pilots in the dogfight. You know whether or not you won the fight, and carrier landings, you know whether or not you hit the three wire. Whereas being a C-130 pilot, it could be somewhat amorphous sometimes how well you got along with the crew, or it sometimes wasn't as cut and dry. Whereas our business is really cut and dry. You know your sales and you know your performance. Your performance, if you're an asset manager, unlike the wealth management side, our ETF that we sell to financial advisors across the country, you know your performance, and then you know your performance against your peer group because asset managers are usually grouped with their peers. So we're a value manager, which is there aren't many of us dinosaurs left on Wall Street because everybody's been, the go growth and the Magnificent Seven, and tech stocks have had all the rave the last 15 years. And having been through that, founding the company almost 30 years ago now, right during the internet bubble, there's definitely some similarities. So between that bubble and the AI bubble
Yeah.
of today, so we're like the Aardvark or like the C-130. We're slow and steady. And in that peer group, we've been named three-time Manager of the Decade over a rolling period. We have a over 20-year track record. And in our peer group, the large value space, that's where we were named the three-time manager of the decade by PSM, which is a database that just ranks all of the asset managers in the country, the hundreds of us. So
I think the Top Gun title over there threw me for the fighter pilot.
yeah, the Top Gun one is actually PSN Informa's, and that's when you're number one. So I think we hit number one, which is unusual for us because again we're usually slow and steady, but our performance is usually much better on the downside when the market is getting beat up. We usually hold up much better. Like in 2022, the market was down over 20% and we were down a fraction. So that's generally when we do better on our slow and steady approach because we own boring companies that are reasonably priced that pay growing dividends, like your Pepsis and Nestle's and Procter and Gamble's of the world, Exxon's, Bank of America, those types of companies.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us 30 years ago you started this business? Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I actually founded the company. It's going to be 29 years in about a week, and I I found that, and you probably know this as a military officer, your young Marines are usually there's two things they're usually getting in trouble um, with their spouses or with money. And I found that a lot of the counseling I would do with Marines was on the money side. So the wealth management side of the business really attracted me to kind of like helping those young Marines, and then wanted to continue that business rather than go off and fly airplanes um, or go to work on Wall Street. I really wanted to found the company based on the wealth management side. But then it grew from that, and that I realized that there were layers of fees that most financial advisors charge. And I also wanted to do the asset management in-house, so focus on individual stocks and individual bonds. So I remember someone asked me once, do you like helping people better or do you like making money better? And I said, really neither. I said, I really want to build a great business. And if I build a great business, it will give back to, I'll make money and will help people if we're always focused on our clients and building a great business, you'll have those things as natural byproducts. So that's kind of what got me interested when I was actually moonlighting. I was in the Marine Corps until 99, but I founded the company in 97, which was a bit of a challenge when I was stationed over in Africa for a little while, and so it was kind of tough. But then getting out after that summer, it allowed me a little bit of a transition to believe that yeah, I can make it. I can make it in this business and not have to rely on a salary. And there were some very, very tough times, along the way, to say the least. Of course, the 2000 bubble, the stock market collapsed 50%. The 2008 financial crisis, the market collapsed another 50%, and then COVID, where the market collapsed 30%. So we've survived three very volatile decades of wars, but our slow and steady, invest like an Aardvark approach of providing regular income to our clients and investors through dividends, and it's worked out really nicely, and so I could never imagine we'd be managing what we're managing today. So it's been an exciting trip, and I hope to do it for another 30 years. I'm not tired yet. So yeah,
Yeah, that's an awesome story. How did you just have the confidence to go from moonlighting and helping Marines in Africa to then saying, I'm going to just do this full time and support myself and my
just
family on this?
I think pure stupidity. At the time, I had no idea that I could. It just when you look back, and I was actually showing my staff this the other day that in 2002 I made like um, 20 something thousand dollars, so I made less than my other one employee that year, and I wondered how do we get by? My youngest daughter, who's now working with us as a trader and getting her CFA, she was 2 or 3 years old, and so it was there were some very challenging periods of time when the 2008 crisis hit. The market halved. That was another challenge. So I just at that time I just had the confidence like, okay, I could do this. I think I'll be able to build this, and it takes a lot of time. When you look back, as when you look back in your company, it's often remarkable to say, wow, this happened. When you're in the fight of that firefight. You think like I'm not growing quickly enough, or I'm not going to make it, and perseverance is absolutely the key. I remember Ross Perot saying that at a Naval Academy meeting once. He visited the academy and he said the key to life or the key to business is perseverance, and couldn't agree with him more.
I absolutely agree with that as well. And what you said about businesses just being successful and profitable, having that second, third order effect of helping not just their employees, but also their families and society as a whole. I mean, I'm a fervent believer. And for-profit businesses actually change the world because of that.
Yeah, I mean, capital. I always say capitalism, with due respect to almost being a Catholic priest a few times in my life. I'll say capitalism is the holiest of all isms. It is it's not perfect. It is exceptionally messy, especially when you're being dislocated, and that's happening now in the industry with artificial intelligence, which is certainly going to change the world, much like the internet did in 2000, or much like railroads did, in the early 1900s and late 1800s. But it's destructive, but it's wonderful in that it's lifted people out of poverty. When you go back to the early 1800s and saw what percentage of the population was in dire poverty compared to what it is today, it's remarkable. The capitalism has done what it has.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to learn a little bit more about AI and the impact of investing there, but for the sake of this podcast and the focus here, I'd like to understand it, what your, as a solo entrepreneur, no doubt when you started, when were you able to build that first team of yours, what you would call a team, and who was that person?
I think that's the hardest part of when you start a business is either A, getting the right partners out of the gate, or if you're raising capital, or B, your first employee, when you realize I'm going to pay this person X amount of dollars and it's going to immediately cut into profits. And I think the first employee is the hardest because it's a leap of faith in believing that this investment, which takes time. I always say that a new employee takes a minimum of 3 years for that investment to pan out. Sometimes much longer, very rarely shorter. If it's a salesperson, you get lucky. So every new person that you bring on is a risk. And that first person I brought on, Rita, is still with me, or close to the first person at least, when she came on board. And she just turned 70 and is still working with me. And I always often kid that she came through a short-term staffing agency and was working part-time with me for about $12 an hour, and she was probably netting out like $8 an hour or whatever it was. And it's worked out for both of us and along the way. And I never, you do fear a lot. And so when you're taking on that first employee, I think it's sometimes unnerving for people to realize. I'm often counseling our business owners or clients that that's something they usually wait too long to do. And then every new person you're bringing on, it's always that same. We're bringing on two new people right now. One just started a week ago and one in a month, and it's always, you always wonder, okay, is this going to work out? Is this the right move to make? And I've made so many mistakes over the years, that there's often a risk too in hiring, So but it's always the right thing to do. I think if you're going to grow, you have to bring on the right people, build the right culture.
Yeah, you can't do it yourself, and you know you have to have a team to execute your vision, obviously. So hiring, that's something new. I always say that veterans, that's why I'm fascinated, because veterans typically don't have that background of hiring, right? Of recruiting.
Yeah.
You're not taught that in the military. You're given to execute with what you have. So um, figuring that out, it's a lot of times just making mistakes, or if you have somebody to guide you. But
Well, that's why it's good to have a partner like your firm where you can get help and get assistance, especially if you're doing it for the first time, to make it to not make as many mistakes as I made earlier, and I'm still making them. There's still a risk because it is a little bit of art and a little bit of science, and you're trying to meld those two things. And but it's when you get a good partner for you and you get the right people, and you do get to choose, which is the wonderful thing, unlike the military. But yeah, I don't know why more military. I know I get interviewed every year by a veteran-owned for veteran-owned business, and I don't know why there aren't more veteran entrepreneurs like yourself. I think maybe we're brave in terms of fighting, the enemy, but we're not so much in terms of we look for stability. So I know like a lot of my classmates will go to work at Pepsi or go to work at Procter and Gamble or go to work for the government or a government contractor, military contractor, and there's that security side of it that's nice, and it's tough when you go out on your own and you're an entrepreneur. So getting advice from people like yourself and firms like yourself and others who have done it is always helpful.
When looking back, Jim, um, was there a hire that just changed the trajectory of your business? You're maybe growing slightly, but then this key hire was just you took off. Why?
I think two hires from me. One is Rita, who's been with me for, you know, 29 years almost, and since the beginning. So that first assistant to help take a lot of the administrative burden off. And the second was my wife, who's my wife now. She wasn't when I hired her. It's 19 years ago. She was the first financial advisor that I hired to work directly with clients that I was working with. So that was a huge leap of faith for me to say, people are coming to me because they trust me. Will they trust another financial advisor? And she was the first. So I think that was, she was a remarkable hire in that sense, and kind of instilling in me like, okay, yeah, this can be done. And then secondly, thirdly, when I moved from North Carolina to New York and wondered, can the business go on without me, and hired Chris, who was a Morgan Stanley advisor, and he's still with me now for 9, 10 years. It's going on 10 years because that was 2015. So bringing him on to kind of maintain those clients in the air and also grow in his sales expertise, has worked out very well for both of us. So I can't really narrow it to one hire, but I would say those three hires were critical to our success of our firm.
That's awesome. When you're looking at your Rita hire, your Annie hire, your Chris hire, what was it? Was it their skill or mindset or something else that made you think that they would be successful with you?
At the time, it was just pretty lucky because I wasn't very good at hiring, I don't think, and broke a lot of eggs along the way. But and maybe just as early as it was, thought it was easy. Thought it was because I was like those three worked out so well. I'm like, oh, hiring's easy. This is, but it certainly is has been much more challenging since. And I would say that back then I wasn't. It was all gut really back then. You're looking more at the personality, the character of the person, and referred from people that you trust, which is kind of like our clients. We get great clients from our 600 clients that we have, and they refer great people who are nice people. And I think it's the same with hiring. But I do think it's important to be more scientific about it too. Not that that's going to guarantee success, but using a firm like yours that it's going to go through these things. And sometimes on paper, you think this person's perfect. They pass all the tests. They have the perfect, you know, whatever measure you're using for personality traits, and they are the absolute fit. And this is my hire that I need. And you quickly realize that, oh, that didn't work out, and the only other thing I would say at that point is it's often I liken it to getting married. It's like you could live with somebody for a while, but it's not the same as when you actually get married. And until you marry them, sometimes you don't really realize what you're getting. And my poor wife, she's had to put up with me for 14 years now, and she probably didn't know what she was getting into either. But and we were working closely together and knew each other really well. And I was a single dad with 3 kids, and she was jumping into a mess. So it was tough on her. So you often don't know, but I think that you can maybe use all of those things to kind of make it you have improve your chances of success of a good hire.
Um, yeah, I know Annie's been she's been your right hand woman, right,
Yeah,
throughout your entire growth. And now
yeah,
you have your daughter helping you as well, and you have these other great people. Um, but she's been a key partner for you, for
yeah,
sure.
huge. I mean, just and the thing about Annie, she's never done the investment analysis side or trading like my daughter's doing, but she's worked with clients. She's done it, compliance, operations, admin. So she kind of knows where all the bodies are, right? She understands all parts of the business, so she's a integral part. And Claudia, whom we got from you from Milspec, has been remarkable. And that's where you think like sometimes you're taking a chance. You think this person doesn't have really any background at all in wealth management or asset management, but then they're just superstars. They just rocket to the top. And she's already in less than 2 years been promoted to COO, and she works hand in hand with Annie. And the funny thing is, you know, Annie's like, she completes my sentence. They think the same way, and they're so good together. They're constantly working. So Annie's now our chief integration officer. So they're always working on new initiatives, and they work so well together. And put Claudia through Schwab's managerial program, which was a good investment on our part and time, obviously too on her part. And she's clearly been ready for the promotion now. So she's moved up very quickly at the firm.
Yeah, well, on that, making a lot of mistakes and hiring using gut versus also data, right? Even world-class employers or world-class people who hiring managers, they're successful about 60% of the time,
Wow.
which is incredible when you think about it. It's because you're dealing with people. People are we change, right?
That
And
yeah, actually that stat makes me feel very good because I was going to throw out, and I don't know, I was going to throw out that I've been 50-50,
mm,
and maybe I have been 60 if I went through every hire, but because I know that the larger firms use all of those things and resources that I don't, as a smaller business with only 13 going on 14 employees, have. So that makes me feel a little bit better that I'm not as big a failure at hiring.
no, no, it's like it's part of the nature of trying to read people, and you have a lot. I'm working with you. You have a lot of intuition. You have and you apply data with it. Um, but I'm curious now as you've evolved, right? And we've learned a little bit more, became wiser. How do you how quickly are you able to differentiate between an actual high potential candidate once you hire him and then someone who just interviews well?
I think that, like investing, I always say investing is 49% math, science, but you only need a fourth grade education. And it's probably the same for hiring, right? You don't need so and then 51% art and experience, where you can analyze a company very quickly and realize, yeah, we probably want to own this company, or no, we want to avoid it. And I think it's the same with people. You'll have some tells, and they may be a great interview, but maybe not a great fit for the person that you're looking for in a particular role. Um, or they could be a great interview and just not, for example, the individual I just interviewed with you, I just sit there and say, I always hire for 3 things, it's character, character, and character, because I can teach if you're intellectually curious and you have that character, right, of being intellectually curious, and you're honest and you're humble, which is something you don't hear about Wall Street. It's important as you're an analyst, but also when you're working with people, being humble and being compassionate is also one of our core values. I can't really teach compassion. I can't teach. One of our new hires came from our firm. She's been with us 6 months now. She worked as a veterinarian, and I had clients actually say this person's not qualified for this job. And I said, first of all, they're in operations. Second of all, they have a team around us, and third of all, they care and they have the character that I'm looking for in the hire, and they'll learn. They're intellectually curious. So gauging intellectual curiosity and desire to help people is tough to gauge, I think, in an interview. And but I think it's critical to to success. And the analyst position is a little bit harder because analysts, we introvert types are kind of cold-hearted economists, and sometimes they don't have as much compassion or humility, especially on Wall Street. But getting that piece right, I think, is critical. And I don't know how to get the science side of that to see if it's there, but I think that you're just kind of listening for tips or clues during the interview, and taking time to get to know the person to see if they do have that and that character that'll mesh with our culture.
Yes. Yeah. Personality wise, we use a lot of behavioral. We've talked about this behavioral interviewing questions and then peeling back the layers to understand the motivations of decision making. Um, and then also you probably if you like sit down and think about it, you probably have seen this as well. But if somebody is interested in your firm and they are intellectually just uh, curious, then they'll just ask a lot of questions,
Yep.
right?
No
They'll just
doubt.
they'll
Yep.
just ask a lot of questions to understand how you do things.
And they'll do their homework prior. They'll read my book, or they'll you know
Yes.
they'll say, like, is this a right? Just like when we're looking for clients, if some client is asking me about what's the right quantum company to invest in because artificial intelligence is going to change the world, I'm like, well, yeah, you're probably right, but you're not the right client for us. We're going to buy the boring tech. We're going to own the IBMs and the Ciscos and the infrastructure, but we don't want to be on the bleeding edge where 9 out of 10 of these companies are going to go out of business, and we don't know which one's going to be the next Google. So just like when you're gauging, is this the right investor or client for us? And I think it's the same thing for a hire. Is this the right fit for our firm? Do they have the right? And younger people are always, I don't even ask that question anymore in terms of what's your favorite company right now? Because younger people are always gonna, I remember one really bright friend of mine still to this day. I said, "What's your favorite stock right now?" She said, "True Religion Jeans." It's MIT, Sloan School, exceptionally bright. Those are the answers I'm always going to get, right? From whatever's hot right now, a younger person's going to be invariably attracted to that, right? Because it's growth mentality. Whereas me trying to find a value investor, especially in the last 15, 20 years of a growth market, you're just not going to find it. So I'd rather inculcate our process and our philosophy into them from a young, not hire somebody who's older with bad Wall Street habits already. Although you have some wonderful people like Anu who sent to me, who's older, and not young, who would break that mold. And again, you're hiring for the character, and Anu has been just a wonderful person, humble, and a very good analyst, and has been a very good portfolio manager for our international portfolio for the past couple of years. And so I don't know how to. And then I'll often ask like unusual questions, like you said, you're solicit for questions, but yeah, you're listening to see if they're asking questions. And I think what's funny about our culture too is we tend to be dog people. I don't know why that is, and coffee drinkers. Although I'm drinking tea right now, I usually drink coffee first and tea, then back to coffee. So I don't know what that has to do with our culture, but I mean, maybe dog people are compassionate and giving, or something, but we all seem to have dogs, or be dog people. And um,
Well, that's very interesting. You know what I've admired about you, Jim, and the company you've built was that even before, like way before the pandemic, you guys were remote. You were intentionally a remote company,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you built that. And so I'm curious, how do you do so well in shaping that culture as a remote team?
That was a fear when Annie and I moved to New York or New Jersey, right outside New York City. Um, was can I, remotely manage the firm? And that was the first test in 2015. And then we realized that yeah, we can. And what's been remarkable, and I know most firms, especially on Wall Street, you see it in New York City, it's kind of going back to normal, and companies are forcing their people to go back. I think that's a trust issue, where you don't trust your people to do the work, and so that issue, having to see them there. The other side of that argument is that maybe if you're in a creative business, or there is a magic that sometimes happens in a room. So I don't think that's as necessary for our industry. And so we've been able to, and it's not the same as when you're meeting with your clients too, and you're meeting face to face and breaking bread with them over lunch or dinner, and as having a remote meeting like we're having right now. But it's close, and you can do it, and you can manage the team if you have the right people. I haven't met Claudia yet in person. You know, I've only met Anu 3 times in 3 years. So it's you can get to know somebody, if you can see them. Still, the video is critical, and you can manage a team from far. And what that allows you to do is get terrific, great people wherever they are. I was feeling for the individual that you just referred to us, that Charlesley did, because I'm like, oh, they're in El Paso. Well, there are no jobs in El Paso. There's just no opportunity. But for a firm like ours, you could be on Mars as long as you're willing to work on East Coast time. I love, working at like Mountain Time, because when I'm out in my cabin in Montana, because you get up early in the morning, and then you could take your lunch break and go skiing for a little bit, or go for a hike, and then come back to work, and it kind of forces you to get up at that 6 o'clock hour to get
Yeah.
going with the team. And so as long as somebody's willing to work on your time zone, then you can really get people from anywhere. And I think that's a huge benefit when you're looking for talent, that you're not just looking in one geographic area. So I think it's a wonderful.
Mm. So I mean, you obviously very focused and intentional about hiring people for character, somebody who's inquisitive and compassionate and have integrity. Now they have the fundamentals to join you, to join the firm. How do you maintain and motivate these people then, like, remotely? Because it is more difficult in a digital environment to have
It's
fun and
much more
interact.
difficult. It's much more difficult to train. I think you have to be, because you do learn a lot organically when you're just in the office. It rubs off on you, whereas you have to be much more intentional about training and bringing people on board. And I think that piece is absolutely harder. So you have to put regular meetings and regular training on the calendar, to make sure that you're doing things together and collaboratively when you're doing them, so that the person's being trained. There is a bit of message to Garcia. I don't know if you had that at West Point, but at the Naval Academy, we were given the pamphlet, and my son's learning that now because he's a plebe at Navy. And that idea of, and he's heard it. My 4 kids have heard it 100 times. Like they'll ask, "Hey, Dad, how do you do this?" I'm like, "Message to Garcia, figure it out." You don't ask me if you figure it out. And so there is that aspect of it, that you need people. That's where you need the intellectual curiosity component is really key. They have to be self-starters. They can't be like, I'll often interview military people who are looking to transition, or they're just asking for career advice. And I'll say, well, like Merrill Lynch has a great training program, or Edward Jones has a great training program, and you'll have to be a broker, and you'll have to, go through, but they have a good way of kind of going through the program so that you learn it. And I'll say our way is different. You have to be a bit more of a self starter, and the motivation side, I think, is those morning meetings are key. We do it 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, where I kind of have a theme of the day, whatever that may be. It could be about our investments. It could be about an article in the Wall Street Journal, or it could be, one of our traits. And you're trying to motivate the team and get them on with that limited time that you have with them, because everybody else has their own, responsibilities. And one of my associates is my roommate from the academy, and so that person, they have a character, that they may, their pros and their cons, and in this case, she does all the IT work for the firm, and so everybody's so different. That's by far my hardest job. My hardest job is not um, picking stocks, and it's not working with our clients who are just wonderful. The hardest part is leading the team. And I think it's like being a great coach. There's very few great coaches, right? Because they push people to do things that they often don't want to do, and push them out of their comfort zone, but not push them too hard enough to get them to leave, and which ultimately can happen too. And that's part of the challenge of being a great coach, right? So you got like Nick Sirianni just wins, and then he loses his offensive coordinator, and then he loses a couple of key parts of his team, and then putting them back together, and then remotivating them again. And it's just every day a battle, and you have to get up with that outlook that you know, and I think it's the most important job for any small business, is leading your team has to be um, at the forefront of it, because it's always a big challenge. But finding self starters is really important, so that you don't have to be there every minute, and especially critical if you're going to have a remote team.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Obviously, having people, that's a key ingredient for building that team and running that team. But leading, that's very, as you said, that's very difficult. And there are companies out there that's not ran with the focus of leadership, right? And I often wonder, how does that work? Because for us, that's the most difficult part.
I don't think it can be a great. I mean, you could walk into a McDonald's, right, and it's the same product. It's the exact same everything, but you immediately know the bathroom's dirty. The service was unfriendly. It was slow, and it's all about the leadership. It's all about that management team and getting the right people. And the wonderful thing about leading a company is, unlike the military, is you don't have to work with the people you're given. I was watching a documentary on Vietnam, which I studied a lot at the Naval Academy, and I was thinking, holy smoke, how did this young lieutenant deal with what he was dealing with? Because you couldn't just say you're fired, right, and you get out. And I think in that sense, it's easier as an entrepreneur, although sometimes hard. I always wait too long to let somebody go. It's much better to get the right people on the team, and that's the advantage you have as an entrepreneur. You don't have to, unlike leading a platoon where you have some who are just not good performers. You don't have to keep them with you. You can let them go. That's a huge advantage of being an entrepreneur. And I remember reading probably 25 years ago, Good to Great by what's his
Jim
name? Yeah, Collins. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's it. But I would even say, don't even bother with trying to make B people into A people. They usually don't become it. It's just get A people. Don't, get rid of the C's. Absolutely. Try not to hire the C's. You're invariably going to make that mistake. I was glad to hear you said it's just 60% a success rate. So you're going to make that mistake 40% of the time, and then let them go quicker, and then move on, and just get your A team. It's critical to success for your firm.
So you mentioned that, speaking of mistakes and challenges and lessons learned here, You mentioned one, you hold on to people too long. Like what is too long? What have you determined too long to be now?
Too long for me has been 2 weeks, and too long for me has been 6 years. So because they might have the competency that's right, but they're just poison, like Nick Saban calls it, rat poison, right? When you let that into your culture, and it's very true. It is rat poison to a team, and when somebody's not the Naval Academy thing, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Everybody knows that weak link, and you've got to get rid of it because if you don't, so I've made the mistake of holding on to those people because they were competent, of not getting rid of them quick enough. And
Well, that's interesting. You bring that up. For example, that 6 year situation you mentioned, was that because you didn't realize that that person was breeding rat poison, or for until year five, or was that also was it just you were rationalizing?
I rationalized, yeah, and I knew, and I knew. But you say, they, you know what, they're fitting that role. They're competent in their job. They do it. They're a B. I'm never going to make them an A, but they do the job well. And it's a critical role, so you're like, I'm going to keep them there. But the right thing to do is to let them go,
Well,
because
Jim, I've been in that situation as well. I've seen other people in that situation that sometimes that person is, a very, key component to what you're providing. So it is very difficult just to rip them out, right? Or even very difficult to subtly bring somebody in due to other reasons. If you were thinking back about that as you are now, what would you have done differently? Eh, Like, what could you have done differently in reality? I know we would like to say we want to get rid of them sooner, but you know, knowing the effects, the aftermath now, was it very detrimental to keep him that long, or
yeah, it was detrimental to keep them. So I should have let them go much
and
earlier than I did. And I actually did try twice, and the person, begged for the because I think in 29 years of business, I've never been asked for a raise. I think the sharing profits is critical. Um, and so like one of the people that you sent to me was a risk on paper, but I felt like this person can sell, right? And Max, who has just been incredible, and he's just an ever running bunny, right? He's just terrific. He's doubled his compensation with me since starting 3 years ago. Doubled. And that's so, and that's because I never asked for me. None of my associates ever, actually, except that one person who I should have let go of. It was the only person that ever asked for me, even though I was giving regular raises. Um, so I think that I think that and I call it radical transparency. I used to actually share salaries, which I don't do anymore, but I share my books. I share, like, here are my margins, guys. They're only 21% right now because I'm investing. My biggest expense is you. And I share my books with them and show them, here's all of our investments that we're making. And then I think they understand when I make some hard changes, like I just did on the sales side with like certain accounts, or not bonusing. I'll say, this is what Merrill Lynch is doing, or this is what other asset managers are doing, and this is why I'm doing it. I look at somebody like Chris, whose income has gone up fourfold since he started with me, and almost
that's awesome.
fivefold. And so I think that that's part of it, but everybody is motivated by different things. So trying to figure out what it is, it's not always money. I think this is where, um, being a remote business, a work from home business now, and we just closed our New Bern office. That's a big risk. Literally, like last week, we just closed it
Oh,
after
yes.
being open. I opened that business,
Yeah.
that office in 2000, and so we were there for 24 years, and a lot of our clients in that area got used to it. So the question is what can you do it? And I think with remote I think that's a benefit that a lot of people appreciate, especially if they have young families and they have children at home, and the ability to be able to take breaks when they want it and work at their own convenience. I think is a huge benefit, where people might that might motivate them more than salary.
Well, thank you. So, thinking about these lessons and challenges, what do you think is the hardest part about building this strong team that people don't talk about?
Yeah, I'd probably go back to the hire for character. Hire for people who are that are like you, that'll be your culture. And when I say like you, I've been kidding with my team. I'm like, I used to say in the Marine Corps that we're all green. And if you look at our team, it's exceptionally diverse. My roommate at Navy is now a woman. It's trans. I mean, so we have very far left, we have very far right, we have all races, ethnicities. And I always say, I don't care, we're all green. And now it's green meaning money. We're all going to do what's best for the client. So looking for people it's in our name. Altrius comes from altruism, putting our clients and our investors ahead of ourselves first, is part of who we are. And so hiring for that character and making sure that person is intellectually curious so that they can learn the job is absolutely key to success.
Yeah, and and leading that people like you, Jim. I remember. I was the one that was like, Jim, you should probably hire Sharon. I mean, not not only do you know her and you have the experience, she's in a point, and I knew that you would be the type to say, yeah, let's let's really consider it, and because
Mhm.
she can definitely help level up the company. So
Yep.
that's really awesome. Okay, do you have a non-traditional kind of hiring strategy that you've used that's worked for you?
Not really non-traditional. I'd say, we love working with firms like yours to find people that I would never be introduced to, like Max and Claudia and Anu. And then other times it's people like a roommate or uh, or my wife's best friend, right, who works at a veterinarian hospital, who might not is very non-traditional, but the character of the person, their work ethic, and that they have no background in finance, but they can learn it. I can teach that. Um, so I'd say that's the non-traditional, is just like we get great clients from our existing clients, you can get great people from your existing associates also. So I think that's and then sometimes they just come to you from nowhere, like Nico, where you just kind of get to know them. They may have reached out to you for career advice, and then you start a conversation or a dialogue with them, and over time you realize this person may be a good fit. I'd say that's the case with Nico or Chris or Brady, who's coming on board our firm, who interned for me as a high school student, and I would never have high school students, but he's like, if I were to have a child that's most like me, it would be Brady, right? Interned through us all through college, but he really wanted to go, much like Zach initially wanted to do consulting and wanted to go to DC. I said, go do it. I said, go try it. I said, I don't think you're going to like that, but go try it. And then Zach came back to the firm realizing consulting was not for him. Brady really wanted to do investment banking and private equity. And I said, go do it. You're going to work those 120 hours a week. You'll succeed if you want to, because he's so bright. But he kind of saw that and realized, like, the disillusionment side of it, and what you're giving up to achieve that potentially, and said, what you're doing, helping clients face to face, I really like. And private equity is nice. I heard Cliff Assis say private equity is a scam. I wouldn't say it's a scam, but private equity, like, what's your company worth? What's my company worth? It's until you have that exit event, you don't really know, which is why I prefer the publicly traded markets. And so Brady got to see that. And so here's somebody I've known since he was 13, 14 years old. And now he's, 26. And so that's very non-traditional, right? Starting with an intern and realizing, okay, this is a person who is exact. I mean, he even helped me write my book and edit my book. Just a tremendous asset to the firm and tremendous mind. Um, Not to say that he's absolutely going to work when he joins the firm, but at least it gives you more of a, hopefully a higher probability of success to know that it'll work. And so those are all the non-traditional means I would say that have worked. Using your existing network, using your existing associates, and then using interns. I think interns are a nice way of getting talent too.
Yeah, just so broadening your your just your exposure to great people. Um, I've 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 seen, Jim, that these non-traditional ways. I've always said you can find talent anywhere. What's very interesting about your is that your approach is that you've made it happen, and you're calling these people that are, that aren't like A players elsewhere, or potentially couldn't be A players elsewhere, or they left an industry like Max. He left insurance, and now he has no background in investing, but he's now an A player for you.
I
But
definitely, that is huge because just like I'm a value investor when it comes to investments, you're looking for beaten down. I'm looking for value investments with people too, where you're not, because oftentimes I could think of like one of my best friends who's MBA, Columbia lawyer, but you're going to spend so much on that person and they may not add the value. And I'm always looking for somebody instead of MBAs or CFAs, which are nice and what I want. I like PSDs, as Hank Greenberg used to call them. People who are poor, smart, and with a deep desire to be rich. If you're going to, for those salespeople roles, hiring PSDs like Max or like Chris is I think is critical for sales roles. So, and that's out of the box thinking. My dad was a very good insurance salesman, and he had to come home to my mom in 1973 and tell her that he didn't get hired for a job that was commission only. And I remember Marv Raff, who is his boss, said, now I just, if they have a pulse, I hire him because I was wrong with your dad. He turned, my dad was, a very good salesperson he was a barber. No college education, no any, but he was a good salesperson. But I think my dad had that PSD mentality. He really wanted to succeed and had the perseverance, and that's hard to gauge sometimes on people, and that's not something that comes through necessarily on one of those personality trait
right,
things.
right. I love that, the PSD. That's the first time I've heard of it. I'm
That's
like,
an Ace Greenberg thing, so I can't claim that one.
um, but I think also like just like the key takeaway for people listening, watching, whatever, is that um, an A player is what you kind of it's for your organization. It's unique to you. It can be. It doesn't have. They're not like an A player for everyone. That's
That's
not
right.
what I mean. It's if the culture that they're working in is not a good fit, but they come to you and they flourish under your leadership, under your direction.
Uh,
I mean, that's huge. And Jim, you've done that many, many times now.
Yeah, I don't think I would have done well in a lot of different environments. I was almost court-martialed in the Marine Corps twice, I think. So it's I look at it and say like I don't think I would have worked well at a large bank on Wall Street.
Mm,
Especially in my earlier years, the fighter in me, I think I had to do it my own way and want to do it my own way. So I think getting the right person for your organization, for your culture is critical. And you're right, they might not work at a different place, but they might thrive under yours.
yep. 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 So always keeping your eyes open for sure. Always be recruiting as well. Um,
Exactly.
All right, last few minutes here, Jim. This has been an excellent conversation. I'm very curious on your outlook, and I'm sure everyone else is as well on AI. Right, this being the bubble for AI now. Like, how is that changing your approach in investing or outlook?
Yeah. So that's the big unknown is I'm always trying to think 10, 20 years into the future and how our jobs are gonna change. And artificial intelligence has been remarkable in that it could take a conversation like this, a meeting, we use Jump AI, and it just in within minutes consolidates the whole meeting and puts out a much better than if I was taking notes myself. So from a productivity standpoint, artificial intelligence has made our lives a lot easier. And as analysts, I mean, 30 years ago, I was using paper, right? So you get the profit and loss statements, the earnings statements, and the balance sheets, and that's how you analyze companies. Well, now we have systems between Bloomberg and Thomson that would take 15, 20 people to do. And so it hasn't put people out of jobs. I don't think artificial intelligence necessarily will. It may, though, in 15, 20 years when robots are doing a lot of other things. It may. There's certainly going to be, this is where capitalism is, there's a creative destruction that goes on where we're going to have to, I think people have to continually change, and adjust and adapt to if their particular job gets outsourced, or just like they had to when jobs were getting outsourced overseas and people could do it for cheaper. It's the same thing. So it's hard to think how AI is going to change and how rapidly it's going to change. So I think that's a challenge, and we're certainly seeing significant cutbacks in the tech sector and in our sector, in the finance sector, where people, or even my son, who's now getting his master's at Virginia right now, the job market is tough. Or the person you just sent to me, where they have a master's in finance from Georgetown. It's like it's a tough environment right now to get jobs, and a lot of companies are deciding, what, for these lowest entry jobs where usually you had a glide path, we can, we don't need them because a computer can do this for us. So how do they get that career path when they're not getting, as an analyst? It's like you're a junior analyst, you spend 5 years doing that, you get good at what you do, you become a senior analyst, and then 5-10 years after that you can become a portfolio manager, and you have that learning curve over decades. And well, without that first step, without learning that business from the beginning, what do you do? So I think it's finding other jobs for that person too, so that they're doing other things that the computer can't do is critical also. And that may be some sales, it may be like seeing if they have a sales gene in them too.
Sure.
That's like,
So, I mean, as far as though, for you though, you being a values investor, you invest in like an Aardvark, your core philosophy, you're still betting on what's worked, right? You're betting on what's worked. So,
yeah, yeah. From an investment standpoint, yeah, you do the same. And I think from a hiring standpoint too, I like to hire people who are value investment. And like I told my son, I wouldn't hire him right out of college because he needs to get beaten up by life a little bit. I said, you really need to get beaten up and go out into the workforce to appreciate working at a place like Altrius. I go, I'm not going to hire you right out of college to come into the firm. Like my daughter did. She worked for Bloomberg for a couple of years, and now she works for us. So I think that's an advantage. At least seeing, I had to, if I wouldn't appreciate my job today if I didn't put those 9 years in the Marine Corps and take orders like I did for 9 years.
agreed, agreed. Yeah, our past experiences definitely have shaped us to be today. So to who we are today. So thank you, Jim. I took a bunch of your time, but this has been fascinating conversation. And for folks who are interested in looking up Altrius, just you can Google Altrius Capital, altrius-capital.com, and also reach out to Jim. He's on LinkedIn. So
Thanks for having me, Freddie. I really appreciate it.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. Now, everyone else, go build your A team. Thanks.